How are you guys doing? And a happy new year to all. My name is Shinya and I'm a pastor of Jesus Center. So today on January 5th, we don't have English service, so I'm going to share my sermon on YouTube. And today's sermon theme is Jesus Center is for you. 1. Jesus Center is for you, number 1. So if we have 1 and we have 2, the 2 will be next week. And today's verse is Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 8 to 12. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 8 to 12. I'm just gonna read chapter 4 verse 9 and 12. And verse 9 says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. And verse 12 says, through 1 may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. So there's a verse. And please read whole verses in chapter 4, verse 8 to 12 when you have time. And this year marks the 9th anniversary of Jesus Center. And last Christmas, we ended the year with a fully packed concert. We had a Christmas concert with all the musicians and dancers and gospel choirs. And that was packed, praise God. And we had over 500 people. And most of them never went to church. It was such a blessed moment. But I'll never forget how Jesus Center all started. At first, I thought, well, it shouldn't be too hard to do the church. But in reality, it was so tough. But when we started Jesus Center, thankfully, and so many people supported us. And we've also experienced countless of miracles. One of the first miracles was when my friend offered us his company's rental space they never used on weekends. So that's where we held our weekly worship services. When we needed a children's ministry, the same company opened a kindergarten. Praise God. And they let us use there for kids ministry. And we needed somebody work with us. Then God gave a great couple from New Zealand for about 2 years with us. That's Phil and Bram. And they're in Japan. And they come to Jesus Center for next couple weeks. So you'll see them. And after 2 years of using this rental space, a huge miracle happened. A pastor from our denomination invited me to take over the chapel. We finalized the agreement in January 2020, just before the COVID pandemic hit. While public and rental spaces became unavailable in the pandemic, we were able to continue worship services because we had own venue. And now today we hold both English and Japanese services. And while the average attendance at churches across Japan is around 20 people. But last week we had a total about 90 attendances across the services. So this shows God has been so grateful and gracious to us, and this shows that Jesus Center is growing in God's hand. I believe that we had more to accomplish God's plan. So I'm excited about what God has for us this year. Now, as we enter 2025, I want to start a new year with a new theme. It is Jesus Center is for you. This message is not for only for each one of us, but for the people around us as well. When we started Jesus Center, we had two main visions, and we still have these on our websites. And one is to be a Jesus-centered church, sharing the salvation of Jesus Christ. And number two is to be a church that loves and serves and contributes to the community and meeting local needs to reflect God's love. Today's point number one is the church is a place for everyone. Today, I'd like to focus on the second point of our church vision, serving the community. That has deeper meanings. By serving others, we show them what it's like to live with God, our Creator, and how wonderful that can be. The Matthew chapter 5, 14 and 16 says, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden." So you are shining and you are reflecting God's glory. And so people see God through you. The church is also a place where we help and support one another because we were created to do so. This is why being connected to church is essential and a blessing for everyone. Today's verse is Ecclesiastes 4, and verse 12 says, "Though one may be overpowered and two can defend themselves, a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken." This verse is often read at weddings, but it's not specifically about marriage. It's a lesson about life's journey, drawn from the travel practices of the time. When King Solomon wrote this around 3,000 years ago, travelers in the Middle East didn't travel alone. They traveled in groups, supporting and protecting one another, because there might have been dangers and challenges. And Solomon used this image to teach that life is better with companions and that relationship centered on God are so strong and enduring. So I would say everybody needs friends. Everybody needs companions. Everybody needs a church to belong. And today's number 2 is we're made to help one another. From the very beginnings, God created us to help one another. Adam was given Eve because God saw that he needed a helper. Through the Bible, we see examples of people walking together and supporting each other. When Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, people needed his leadership, but Moses was supported by his brother Aaron, who helped him communicate with people because Moses was not good at speech. Exodus chapter 4 and 10, verse 10 and 14 says that. Even Jesus, who was fully God, walked with the 12 disciples because he trained them to carry the message of the gospel, but they supported Jesus during his ministry. Before the crucifixion in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus asked his disciples to stay awake and pray with him because he too needed support. The Matthew 26:38 says, "No one is meant to journey through life alone." I'd like to share a story. This was an interview with a retiring school principal. He once survived a near-death experience when his team became stranded on drifting ice in northern Hokkaido when he was in college. One of his companions had brought a radio, which initially seemed unnecessary, but ultimately saved their lives. They used the radio to call for help, and a rescue team saved them. This principle says the experience taught him to live his life helping others, which led him to become an educator. His story reminds us that we too have a radio connecting us to God. But what about those around us who aren't yet connected? Jesus Center is for you. Jesus Center is your place. It's also a place for those around you, your friends, your family, and your neighbors. Through this church, many have met God and experienced healings and found hope and peace. Let us share the blessing with others this year. Let's make 2020 the year we truly live out our theme. Jesus Center is for you. And today's sermon is Jesus Center is for you number 1. So next week, we'll explore what the church truly is and how we can share God's message with others. Thank you for listening. And we will have an English service next week on 12th. And we also have English service on 3rd week, which is 19th. And we have guest from New Zealand, and he is a Phil Gottschalk. And we will have a 26 as well, too. All right. So God bless and have a blessed year.